Do you think you can just come here with your strange customs and take our place? Chelsea's voice trembled with rage and her perfectly painted lips twisted into a scornful grimace. I'm not bothering anyone, Angeli replied quietly, not even lifting her eyes from her textbooks. Her voice sounded calm, but those who had known her since childhood would recognize something dangerous in that tone. Not bothering anyone, Madison shrieked, Chelsea's friend. What about the scholarship I was supposed to get? What about the spot on the debate team? You're stealing everything that rightfully belongs to us. Angeli slowly raised her head, and for a moment, a fire flickered in her dark eyes that made Chelsea involuntarily take a step back. But the girl lowered her gaze again, clenching her fists under the table so tightly that her knuckles turned white. You don't know who I really am, she whispered, and there was something in her voice that made everyone in the cafeteria fall silent. And pray that you never have to find out. The best is yet to come. Stay with us to find out how it all ended. But for now, like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Angeli Sharma arrived at Westfield College 3 months ago with a single dream, to get a medical education and become a doctor like her late father. She brought with her a battered suitcase, a full scholarship for excellent academic performance, and a secret that no one was supposed to know. A secret that could ruin all her future plans if it ever came to light. On her very first day, she realized it wouldn't be easy. Westfield was an elite private college where the children of wealthy Connecticut families studied. There were its own unwritten rules, its own hierarchy, and there was no place for someone like her, the daughter of immigrants from a less affluent family. Chelsea Vanderbilt ruled this place like a true queen. Tall, platinum blonde with piercing blue eyes, she was the heiress of one of New England's oldest families. Her father owned the largest construction company on the East Coast, and her mother was a well-known philanthropist and socialite. Chelsea had it all: money, connections, looks, and absolute confidence that the world should revolve around her. Madison Pierce was her loyal shadow. A redhead with freckles, the daughter of a well-known politician, she idolized Chelsea and was willing to do anything to remain in her inner circle. Madison dreamed of a career in politics, and her friendship with Vanderbilt opened the right doors for her. The third in their trio was Ava Kingston, a brunette with aristocratic features, the daughter of a federal judge. Ava was the most ruthless of the trio, although she appeared sweet and well-mannered on the surface. She knew how to strike in a way that hurt for a long time and deeply, while remaining invisible to those around her. In the first weeks, Angeli tried to be invisible. She sat in the back rows during lectures, lunched alone, and spent her free time in the library. But she couldn't become invisible. Her grades attracted too much attention. Angeli was an outstanding student. She received top marks in all subjects, including those that others found incredibly difficult. The professors praised her, held her up as an example, and invited her to participate in research projects. And this drove Chelsea mad. Chelsea was used to being the best at everything. In high school, she was the valedictorian, received several prestigious awards, and got into Westfield without any problems. But now this girl out of nowhere was overshadowing her in everything. Chelsea struck her first blow a month after the semester began. She approached Angeli after an organic chemistry lecture, where Professor Davidson had once again praised the work of the Indian student. Listen, newbie, Chelsea said with a fake smile, but her voice dripped with venom. Maybe you could explain how you managed to do so well in your studies. Are you cheating? Angeli looked at her with surprised eyes. I don't understand what you're talking about. About how girls like you can't be that smart by nature, Madison interjected, stepping closer. You must have some special ways of getting answers on exams. That's not true, Angeli said quietly, feeling a familiar wave of anger rising within her. The wave she had been diligently suppressing for the past 3 years. I just study a lot. Of course you study a lot, Ava chimed in, approaching from the other side. Now they had surrounded Angeli in a semicircle. You probably spend all night cramming other people's notes. A few students slowed their pace, sensing the tension. Angeli saw them pulling out their phones, preparing to film a potential scandal. Her stomach tightened. She couldn't allow herself to become the center of attention. She couldn't risk having people start talking about her, digging into her past. Sorry, I need to go, she said, trying to sidestep the girls. But Chelsea was not going to let her go that easily. She grabbed Angeli's arm, her fingers squeezing so tightly that red marks were left on her skin. We're not done talking, she hissed. "You think you can come here and do whatever you want? This is our place, our college, our rules." Anjali felt something inside her beginning to awaken. Something dark and dangerous that she had kept locked away for 3 years. Her muscles tensed, her reflexes activated. She could free herself from Chelsea's grip in one move. She could take all 3 girls down to the floor in a matter of seconds. But instead, she took a deep breath and forced herself to relax. "Please let me go," she said in as steady a voice as she could muster. Chelsea released her fingers in surprise. She had expected tears, pleas, excuses, anything but such calmness. "This isn't over," she promised as Anjali walked away. Far from over. And indeed, it was just the beginning. In the following weeks, the bullying took on a systematic nature. Chelsea and her friends used every possible way to poison Anjali's life. They accidentally bumped into her in the hallways, spilled coffee or water on her, and spread rumors that she was getting answers on exams from professors in exchange for special favors. But the most painful part was the social boycott. Chelsea wielded her influence so that almost all the students stopped talking to Anjali. When she entered the cafeteria, conversations fell silent. When she tried to join group projects, she was politely told that all the spots were already taken. Even those who had nothing against her personally were afraid to associate with an outcast and incur Chelsea's wrath. Anjali felt like she was in a glass cage. Everyone could see her, but no one wanted to interact with her. She spent her days in solitude, surrounded by hundreds of people who pretended she didn't exist. The only bright spot in her life was the evening calls with her mother. Priya Sharma worked as a nurse in a hospital in New Jersey, often taking extra shifts to help her daughter with dorm and textbook expenses. At 45, she looked older. Years of hard work, stress from her husband's death, and constant worry about her daughter's future had taken a toll on her health. Despite her fatigue, she always found time to listen to Anjali. "How's college going, Beta?" Her mother would ask in Hindi, her voice filled with maternal concern. "Everything's fine, Mom," Anjali lied, sitting in her tiny dorm room. "School is going great. And friends? Have you met any good people?" Anjali gripped the phone tightly, battling the urge to tell the truth. But she couldn't upset her mother, who was already sacrificing everything for her education. "Yes, Mom, I have friends." After each of these conversations, Anjali cried into her pillow, feeling like a traitor. Her mother was so proud of her, so confident in her success. How could she admit that everything was falling apart? But the scariest part was not the loneliness. The scariest part was that the rage inside her was growing. Every day, every humiliation added fuel to the fire that she was desperately trying to extinguish. Sometimes at night, she would wake up, fists clenched, imagining how she would settle scores with her tormentors. And those thoughts scared her more than anything else in the world, because Anjali Sharma truly kept a secret that could destroy her future if it ever became public knowledge. 7 years ago, when she was just 15, she seriously injured a person in a fight. It happened in Mumbai, where her family lived before moving to America. Anjali was walking home from school through one of the city's rough neighborhoods when she was attacked by 3 older teenagers. They demanded money, threatened her, grabbed her clothes, and then something inside her broke. Her father, Dr. Ravi Sharma, was not only a physician, but also a master of Kalaripayattu, a centuries-old South Indian martial art. From a young age, he had taught his daughter this art, saying that a girl should be able to protect herself in a dangerous world. Anjali was a talented student, but her father always emphasized that these skills should only be used as a last resort, only for defense. That day was indeed such a case. Anjali didn't remember the details of the struggle. She only recalled flashes of rage, movements of her body that felt instinctive, natural, like breathing. When it was over, one attacker lay unconscious with a serious head injury. The second writhed in pain with broken ribs, and the third ran away screaming in terror. The police deemed it self-defense, but the scandal shattered the family's life. The first attacker spent several weeks in a coma, and although he survived, he suffered severe brain damage. Anjali's father lost his job at a prestigious private clinic. No one wanted to deal with a man whose daughter had maimed a teenager, even in self-defense. The family was shunned, friends and colleagues turned away from them. Eventually, Ravi Sharma made the decision to emigrate to America, where they could start anew. But a year after the move, he died of a heart attack. Doctors said it was the result of chronic stress, high blood pressure, and sleep disturbances. Anjali knew the truth. Her father never forgave himself for teaching his daughter the techniques she used to maim a person. The guilt consumed him from the inside. Since then, she vowed never to use her martial skills again. She suppressed any aggressive impulses, tried to be quiet and inconspicuous. The memories of how she almost killed someone haunted her every day. But you can't deceive your genes. The reflexes remained sharp. The muscle memory persisted. Sometimes when someone unexpectedly grabbed her hand or startled her, she barely managed to stop the automatic reaction. Now, enduring the taunts of Chelsea and her gang, Angeli fought with herself every day. A part of her wanted to show those spoiled girls what real pain felt like. But she couldn't. She had no right. Too much was at stake. The climax came on a rainy October evening. Angeli had stayed late in the library working on a paper for biochemistry. When she finally decided to leave, the building was almost empty. Only the guard dozed at the entrance, and a few students were poring over books in the far corners of the reading room. Angeli was walking down the long corridor to the exit when she heard familiar voices. Laughter echoed from one of the classrooms, the kind of laughter that signals trouble. Seriously, does she think we don't know? Madison was saying. My dad knows people in immigration. One call, and her whole family will be sent back to India. That's not all, Ava added. My mom works in immigration, and I asked her to check the Sharma family's file. Our quiet little Angeli isn't as harmless as she seems. Angeli froze, feeling the blood drain from her face. They couldn't know. It was impossible. What do you mean? Chelsea asked, intrigued. 7 years ago, 15-year-old Angeli Sharma seriously injured an 18-year-old boy in the slums of Mumbai. Officially, it was self-defense, but who knows what really happened. The boy was left disabled. Maybe our honor student isn't such an innocent lamb after all. The laughter grew louder and more malicious. Can you imagine? Ava continued. Everyone thinks she's so quiet and modest, but she has a mutilated person behind her. I wonder what the college administration will say when they find out about this. And what will her classmates say? Added Madison. Especially after we tell them she hid the truth when applying. That's a violation of the rules, isn't it? Angeli sank to the floor right in the hallway, pressing her back against the wall. Her heart raced so fast that she feared she might faint. It's all over. Everything she had lived for in the last 3 years. Everything her mother worked herself to the bone for. Everything her father sacrificed. It would all come crashing down in an instant. The only question is when it's best to make this public, Chelsea pondered. Maybe tomorrow? Or should we wait until mid-semester so she has time to fall in love with her new life and then let her fall harder? I'm for the second option, Madison giggled. Let her taste success, and then we'll take it all away from her. I agree, Ava supported. Besides, the longer we wait, the more dirt we can dig up on her. I bet this isn't the only dark secret in her biography. Angeli sat in the hallway for another half hour after the girls left. She couldn't force herself to stand up, couldn't make herself move. For the first time in years, she felt truly helpless. When she returned to the dorm, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time, looking at her reflection. A thin face with pronounced cheekbones, large dark eyes that had seen too much pain for her 22 years. Who is she? A victim? A murderer? A student dreaming of becoming a doctor? Or just a scared girl who can't escape her past? That night she didn't sleep, lying in the narrow dorm bed and listening to the rain pounding outside. Options swirled in her mind. She could leave on her own before they make the information public. She could transfer to another college, start over. But what's the guarantee that someone there wouldn't dig up the truth? Or maybe it's better to give up. Go back to her mother, find a job, forget about her dreams of becoming a doctor? But then all her parents' sacrifices would be in vain. Or, Angeli sat up sharply in bed, pushing the dangerous thought away. No, she couldn't even think about that. Violence is not the solution. Violence had already ruined her life once, and she wouldn't let it happen again. But something inside her whispered that patience also has its limits. The next day, Angeli attended classes as if nothing had happened. She sat in her usual spot in the last row, taking notes, answering the professor's questions. But inside, everything was burning. Chelsea and her friends behaved as usual, throwing disdainful glances at her, whispering when she walked by. But now there was something new in their behavior. Anticipation. They were enjoying their power over her, knowing they held her fate in their hands. After the anatomy lecture, Professor Johnson held Anjali back. "Miss Sharma, do you have a minute?" She nodded, approaching his desk. Professor Johnson was one of the few instructors who had always treated her fairly, valuing her knowledge and hard work. "I wanted to discuss the possibility of participating in a summer research program at Yale," he said, handing her a brochure. "It's a prestigious program, and I think you're the perfect candidate. The application deadline is in 2 weeks." Anjali took the brochure with trembling hands. The summer program at Yale could open doors to the best medical schools in the country for her. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. "Thank you, Professor," she said, trying not to show how nervous she was. "I will definitely apply." "Great, and don't doubt yourself, Miss Sharma. You have outstanding abilities." As she exited the classroom, Anjali felt hope and despair battling within her. On one hand, incredible opportunities lay before her. On the other, Chelsea could destroy everything at any moment. She walked down the hallway examining the brochure when someone suddenly yanked it from her hands. "Wow, Yale," Chelsea drawled, looking at the cover. "Seriously? You think they'll accept you into such a prestigious program?" Madison and Ava moved closer, surrounding Anjali in a familiar semicircle. "Give that back," Anjali said quietly. "Or what?" Chelsea sneered. "What are you going to do?" She began slowly tearing the brochure into tiny pieces, and each sound of ripping paper felt like a blow to Anjali's heart. "You know what I'm thinking?" Chelsea continued, tossing the scraps of paper onto the floor. "I think the people at Yale should know who they're dealing with. They should know exactly what kind of student Professor Johnson is recommending to them." Anjali felt something inside her crack. "Stop it," she said, and for the first time, there were steel notes in her voice. "Or what?" Chelsea stepped forward, almost touching Anjali's face. "Are you going to kill me? Like that guy in Mumbai?" The world around Anjali suddenly became very quiet. She could only hear her own heartbeat and the soft laughter of the girls. Time seemed to slow down. "Yes, we know," Madison whispered. "We know all about your little secret." "Shiram. And soon everyone else will know," Ava added. "I wonder what your classmates will think when they find out that a girl who almost killed someone is studying right next to them." "I was defending myself," Anjali said barely above a whisper. "Of course, you were defending yourself," Chelsea mocked. "Poor innocent girl was just defending herself, and the guy just happened to die from a broken neck." Something clicked in Anjali's mind. The last barriers she had so carefully built over the years crumbled in an instant. 7 years of suppressed rage, pain, and humiliation erupted like a volcano. She didn't remember how she moved. She only remembered that in a second, Chelsea was on the floor, and her own hand was gripping the girl's throat. Madison and Ava recoiled with screams of horror. "Do you want to know what happened in Mumbai?" Anjali whispered, looking into Chelsea's wide, terrified eyes. "Do you want to know what I felt when I shattered his skull?" Chelsea was gasping, trying to break free, but Anjali's grip was ironclad. "I felt nothing," Anjali continued in the same quiet, terrifying voice. "Absolutely nothing. He was left a cripple for life, and I didn't even feel regret. And you know what? Right now, I feel nothing too." "Anjali, stop!" Madison screamed. "You don't want to kill someone again." Those words seemed to awaken Anjali. She abruptly released her grip and stepped back, looking at Chelsea, who was coughing and clutching her throat. "You're insane," Chelsea rasped, trying to get up. "You're a total psychopath." Anjali looked at her hand, still trembling from adrenaline. Then she raised her eyes to the girls, who were staring at her in undisguised horror. "Yes," she said calmly. "I guess I really am crazy. For 7 years I tried to be a good girl. I tried to forget who I really am. But you reminded me." She stepped forward, and all 3 girls instinctively backed away. "Now listen carefully," Anjali continued, and there was neither anger nor threat in her voice, only cold certainty. "You can tell everyone about Mumbai. You can ruin my life. But know this. If you do, I will have nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing to lose is capable of anything." "Are you threatening us?" Ava asked in a trembling voice. "I'm warning you," Anjali replied, "for the last time." She turned and walked away, leaving the trio standing in shock. Behind her, she heard their agitated voices, but the words didn't reach her consciousness. In her head, there was only white noise. When she reached her room, Anjali locked the door and sank to the floor. Only then did it dawn on her what she had done. She had attacked a classmate. She had practically choked her in front of witnesses. Now they would definitely go to the administration, and she would be expelled from college even before they managed to make the information about Mumbai public. It was all over, definitively and irrevocably. She sat on the floor until deep into the night, not turning on the light, not answering her mother's calls. Fragments of memories flashed through her mind. The face of her father when he taught her the first moves of Kalaripayattu. Her mother's proud eyes on the day she got accepted into college. Dreams of becoming a doctor and helping people. Everything was destroyed in one moment of uncontrollable rage. Around midnight, there was a knock at the door. Anjali didn't respond, but the knock came again, more insistently. "Anjali, it's Sarah from across the hall. Are you okay?" Sarah Cohen was one of the few students who hadn't participated in the boycott. The rabbi's daughter from Brooklyn, a quiet and serious girl studying sociology. They had never been close friends, but Sarah always nodded to her in the hallway and sometimes smiled. "I heard something happened at college today," Sarah continued through the door. "People are saying you got into a fight with Chelsea Vanderbilt." Anjali didn't respond. "Listen, I don't know what happened, but if you need to talk, I'm here." A long pause. "Or if you need help, my dad knows good lawyers." Lawyers. Anjali hadn't even thought about the legal consequences. Assault, even an unsuccessful one, could lead to serious legal troubles. She got up and opened the door. Sarah stood there in a robe and slippers, a worried expression on her face. "Hi," Anjali said quietly. "Hi, can I come in?" Anjali nodded, stepping aside. Sarah entered and turned on the desk lamp, the soft light illuminating the tiny room. "You look terrible," Sarah remarked, sitting on the only chair. "What happened?" "I messed everything up," Anjali said, sinking onto the bed. "I lost control and ruined everything." "Matwanan, do you want to talk about it?" And Anjali talked. For the first time in 7 years, she told someone the whole truth. About Mumbai, about her father's death, about how Chelsea and her friends drove her to breaking point. Sarah listened silently, nodding occasionally. "I see," she said when Anjali finished. "And what now?" "I don't know. They'll probably expel me. Or maybe even arrest me. Or maybe not," Sarah said thoughtfully. "You know what's interesting? No one filed a complaint with the administration tonight. And no one called the police either." Anjali looked up in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean that if Chelsea and her friends wanted to sue you, they would have done it already. But they're silent. The question is, why?" Anjali pondered. Sarah was right. It was indeed strange. Chelsea never missed an opportunity to hurt someone. Why hadn't she taken such a perfect chance to completely ruin Anjali's life? "Maybe they're planning something," she suggested. "Or maybe they're scared," and Sarah said. "You showed them that you're not as defenseless as you seem. Maybe now they don't know what to do." The next day, Anjali went to class with her heart racing. She expected to be called to the dean's office, for everyone in the classroom to point fingers at her, for something terrible to happen. But nothing happened. Moreover, the atmosphere around her had changed. Students no longer avoided her gaze. Some even nodded when they passed by. During lunch, a guy from a parallel group sat down next to her and started a conversation about the upcoming organic chemistry exam. And Chelsea, Madison, and Ava kept their distance. When their paths crossed in the hallways, they turned away or crossed to the other side. Chelsea wore a scarf that concealed the marks on her neck. A week passed, then another. No one came to arrest Anjali. No one expelled her from college. Moreover, she applied for a summer program at Yale, and Professor Johnson assured her that she had excellent chances. But there was no peace in her soul. Anjali understood that she was living on a volcano. At any moment, Chelsea could make the information about Mumbai public or file an assault complaint. This uncertainty was worse than an open war. The response came a month later, when Anjali least expected it. She was sitting in the library preparing for her biochemistry exam when a familiar figure approached her table. Anjali looked up and saw Chelsea. The girl looked different, not as confident and authoritative as before. There was fatigue in her eyes, perhaps even fear. "May I sit down?" she asked quietly. Anjali nodded, not trusting her own voice. Chelsea sat down across from her, folded her hands on the table, and remained silent for a long time. Finally, she looked up. I want to apologize, she said, and this was the last thing Anjali expected to hear. For what exactly, she asked cautiously. For everything. For the bullying, for the blackmail, for trying to ruin your life. Chelsea paused. I was awful. Anjali didn't know what to say. This could be a trap, another attempt to catch her off guard. Why? She finally asked. Why am I apologizing, or why was I such a bitch? Both. Chelsea scoffed bitterly. I'm apologizing because the last month has been enlightening for me, and I was a bitch because, she sighed, because I've been afraid my whole life of not being the best. I was afraid that if I didn't control everything around me, I would lose everything I have. Afraid? Of what? You, your talent, your strength, your dignity. Chelsea looked down at the table. My whole life, I was told that I was special, that I was better than others. And then you came along and showed that it's not true, that someone can be better than me without having money or connections. Anjali remained silent, processing what she had heard. On the day when we fought, Chelsea continued, I felt real fear for the first time in my life. Not just the fear of losing or being embarrassed. Fear for my life. I wasn't going to kill you, Anjali said quietly. I know now, but I didn't understand that then. Chelsea looked up. I went home and thought about it all night, about how you could have killed me, but you didn't. About how you had the power to destroy me, but you chose mercy. That wasn't mercy. I was just scared of myself. Maybe, but the result is the same. Chelsea paused. And then I started thinking about what pushed you to that, and I realized that we drove you to despair. That a person doesn't just break like that. Anjali felt something tighten in her chest. She wasn't ready for this conversation. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing. I just want you to know I won't bother you anymore, and I won't pass on the information about Mumbai to anyone. And your friends? Madison and Ava will do what I say, and I say, leave you alone. Anjali looked at her for a long time, trying to understand whether this was a sincere change or another game. Okay, she finally said, but if you're lying to me, I'm not lying, Chelsea interrupted. I have reasons to keep my word. What reasons? Chelsea stood up, preparing to leave. After that evening, I thought a lot about many things, including who I really am. She paused at the edge of the table. It turned out that the person I was, I don't like, and I want to try to be someone else. Anjali watched her leave until Chelsea disappeared between the bookshelves. Could this be true? Had it really all come to an end? In the following weeks, life began to improve. Chelsea kept her word. She and her friends no longer bothered Anjali. Moreover, the atmosphere at college changed for the better. Students began talking to her again. Some even offered friendship. Anjali received a letter from Yale. She was accepted into a summer research program. Professor Johnson was thrilled and promised to write her a recommendation for the best medical schools. But the most important thing was something else. For the first time in years, Anjali felt that she could control her life. She was no longer a victim of circumstances or her past. She was the author of her own story. One evening, sitting in her room with her textbooks, she heard a knock at the door. Opening the door, she saw Sarah with a large box of pizza. I thought you might be hungry, Sarah said with a smile, and that we should celebrate your acceptance to Yale. They sat on the floor eating pizza and talking about the future. Anjali shared her plans to become a doctor, while Sarah spoke about her desire to work with refugees and immigrants. You know what struck me most about your story? Sarah said as they finished their soda. What? Sir, how you handled temptation. You had the power to destroy your tormentors, but you chose a different path. I lost control, Anjali countered. I almost choked Chelsea. But you stopped. At the very last moment, when it would have been so easy to go all the way, you stopped. Sarah looked at her seriously. That takes incredible strength of spirit. Anjali pondered these words. Maybe Sarah was right. Perhaps true strength lies not in the ability to inflict pain, but in the ability to stop. A few days later, another unexpected event occurred. Anjali was walking back from class when she saw Chelsea sitting alone in the student cafe. The girl looked downcast, and Anjali suddenly felt something akin to sympathy. Approaching the table, she sat down across from her without an invitation. How are you? She asked. Chelsea looked up in surprise. Do you really care? Seriously, Chelsea paused, fiddling with her coffee cup. Not great, to be honest. It turns out that when you stop being a bitch, not many people want to hang out with you. What about Madison and Ava? They found themselves a new queen. I guess they decided I became too soft. Chelsea smiled sadly. You know, it's funny. I thought all my life that they were my friends, but it turns out they just wanted to be close to power. Angeli nodded. She understood that feeling, discovering that the people you consider close are actually using you. What will you do now? I don't know. Probably study, try to figure out who I am when I'm not playing the role of the evil queen. Chelsea looked at Angeli. Do you forgive me? Angeli thought long and hard about her answer. I forgive you, she finally said. But I won't forget. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Angeli stood up. Good luck, Chelsea. And you, and thank you. For what? For showing me a mirror, even if it was in such a harsh way. As she left the cafe, Angeli thought about the strange twists of fate. Who would have thought that her worst enemy would become, not a friend of course, but not an enemy either. Just a person who is also searching for their path. The semester was coming to an end. Angeli aced all her exams, received several academic awards, and was accepted into the honors program. But most importantly, she finally felt at home in this place. On the last day of classes, she called her mother from her room. How was the semester, Beta? Priya asked, pride evident in her voice. Great, Mom. Better than I could have hoped. And friends, did you find good people? Angeli smiled, looking out the window at the campus that now felt like home. Yes, Mom. I found friends. And more importantly, I found myself. After the call, she sat by the window for a long time, reflecting on her journey. 4 months ago, she had come here as a scared girl running from her past. Now she was a woman who had embraced her story and was ready to build her future. Yes, she had a dark past. Yes, she was capable of violence. But she was also capable of compassion, of forgiveness, of stopping at the most critical moment. And that was perhaps the most important thing. Angeli Sharma was no longer running from herself. She was walking toward her destiny. The destiny of a doctor, a healer, a person who uses her strength to help others rather than to inflict pain. And in that lay her true victory. The summer program at Yale exceeded all expectations. Angeli worked in a lab studying neurodegenerative diseases under one of the leading specialists in the field. Her research work was so successful that she was invited to present her findings at a national conference. But the most important thing was that she had finally found her calling. Working with patients suffering from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases, she understood that she wanted to dedicate her life to neurology. She wanted to help people who were losing themselves due to illness. Returning to Westfield for the new school year, Angeli was a different person, more confident, stronger, with a clear understanding of her goals. She knew that many challenges lay ahead. Applying to medical school, years of study, the struggle for a residency position. But she was ready for anything. On the first day of classes, she walked through the familiar hallways and felt how students respectfully parted before her. She was no longer an outcast or a victim. She was Angeli Sharma, a future doctor, a researcher, a person who had walked through fire and had not broken. In the cafeteria, she noticed Chelsea sitting alone at a table by the window. The girl was reading a psychology book and looked calm, serene, nothing like the domineering queen she had been a year ago. Their eyes met for a moment. Chelsea nodded, barely perceptibly, but sincerely. Angeli nodded back. There was no longer any hatred or fear between them. There was something like mutual respect. Respect for the journey they had both taken, for the lessons they had learned from their confrontation. Angeli sat down at her usual table, but now she was not alone. Sarah sat next to her, and a few more students joined them. People who valued her not for her status or wealth, but for her intellect, honesty, and strength of character. How was your summer? Sarah asked, unwrapping her sandwich. Unbelievable, Angeli replied, her eyes shining. I realized what I want to do for the rest of my life. And what is that? To heal people, to study the brain, to fight against diseases that steal people's identities. Angeli paused. I want to help those who cannot help themselves. Sarah smiled. You know, that sounds very much like you, always protecting those who are weaker. Maybe. Angeli looked around the cafeteria, full of laughing students. But now I understand that strength is not the ability to inflict pain. Strength is the ability to heal. At that moment, she felt that she was finally home. Not in a geographical sense. Home was where her mother worked night shifts for her education. Home was in the memory of her father, who taught her to be strong. But for the first time in many years, she felt like she belonged, surrounded by people who accepted her for who she was. Anjali Sharma was no longer running from her past. She used it as a foundation to build her future, and that future was bright. Sunlight poured through the cafeteria window, illuminating the faces of students, their hopes and dreams. Anjali closed her eyes and allowed herself to simply enjoy this feeling for a moment. The feeling of belonging, peace, and endless possibilities that lay before her. She had walked through hell and emerged stronger. Now nothing could stop her, but fate seemed determined to test that confidence. The next morning, Anjali woke up to the persistent ringing of her phone. Glancing at the screen, she saw an unfamiliar number with a New Jersey area code. Her heart skipped. Something was wrong with her mother. "Hello," she answered with a trembling voice. "Miss Sharma, this is Dr. Patel from St. Barnabas Hospital. Your mother." The world around Anjali collapsed. Priya Sharma had been rushed to the hospital with a heart attack during her night shift. Her condition was serious but stable. The doctors were doing everything possible, but "You need to come as soon as possible," the doctor said gently. "She is asking for you." Anjali didn't remember how she packed her things, how she made it to the bus station, how she spent 4 endless hours on the bus to New Jersey. One thought spun in her mind. She could not lose her mother, not after everything they had been through. In the hospital, her mother lay in intensive care, connected to numerous wires and tubes. Her face was gray, her breathing shallow. Anjali took her hand and felt the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom, it's me. I'm here." Priya slowly opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "Beta, you came." "Of course I came. How do you feel?" "Tired. Very tired." Her mother's voice was barely audible. "But I'm glad you're here." Dr. Patel pulled Anjali aside and explained the situation. The heart attack was extensive. Her mother needed urgent surgery, but even if successful, recovery would take months. Someone would need to care for her. "And how much will this cost?" Anjali asked, although she already had an idea of the answer. The amount was enormous. Open heart surgery, rehabilitation, follow-up care. Even with insurance, the family would face expenses in the tens of thousands of dollars. Anjali quickly calculated. Her scholarships and part-time jobs would only cover the initial stages of treatment. She spent the entire night by her mother's bedside, holding her hand and thinking about what to do. Should she drop out of school and return home to care for her mother? But then all the sacrifices would be in vain. Should she stay in college and find a way to earn for the treatment? But how? The next day, when her mother's condition stabilized a bit, Anjali returned to college to apply for a leave of absence. She had already made a plan. She would find a job, visit her mother every weekend, and continue her studies in a year. But when she entered the dean's office, she was in for a surprise. "Miss Sharma," said Dean Harrison, rising from behind his desk, "I've been informed about your mother's situation. Please accept my condolences." "Thank you, sir. I wanted to apply for a leave of absence." "We'll discuss that later. First, I want to introduce you to someone who is very eager to meet you." He opened the door to the adjacent office, and an elegant man in his 60s wearing an expensive suit stepped out. "Miss Sharma, allow me to introduce Mr. Richard Vanderbilt." Anjali froze. Chelsea's father. What is he doing here? "Miss Sharma," said Vanderbilt, extending his hand, "I've heard a lot about you from my daughter." Anjali tensed. Did Chelsea tell her father about their conflict after all? Were they going to expel her from college now? "Okay, don't worry," Vanderbilt said, as if reading her thoughts. "Chelsea told me how you changed her life for the better, how you helped her become a better person." "I don't understand," Anjali whispered. "My daughter has always been a difficult child, spoiled, cruel, selfish. I blame myself for it. I gave her too much money and too little love." Vanderbilt sat down in a chair. "But last year something changed. She became different, more compassionate, more mature. And when I asked what happened, she told me about you." Anjali still didn't understand where he was going with this. "Mr. Vanderbilt, I don't know what Chelsea told you, but she told me about a girl who showed her what true strength is. Not the strength of money or position, but the strength of character. The strength that allows one to pause at the most critical moment and choose compassion over revenge." Dean Harrison leaned forward. "Mr. Vanderbilt wants to make you an offer, Miss Sharma." I learned about your mother's situation, Vanderbilt continued, and I want to help. My company is willing to cover all medical expenses and provide the best care. Anjali felt the ground slipping from under her feet. But why? I haven't done anything for you. You saved my daughter, Vanderbilt simply said. Maybe not in the literal sense, but you saved her soul, and now I want to save your future. I can't accept such help, Anjali stammered. It's too much. Why not? Because we were once on opposite sides? Vanderbilt smiled. Miss Sharma, sometimes the most important lessons are taught to us by our former enemies. Anjali sat in shock, unable to believe what was happening. The man whose daughter once tried to ruin her life was now offering to save it. There's only one condition, Vanderbilt added. You must finish college and apply to medical school. The world needs doctors like you. Anjali felt tears streaming down her cheeks again, but this time they were tears of relief, gratitude, and something more. Faith that good truly comes back. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to repay you. Become the doctor you want to be. Help people. That will be the best thanks. A week later, Anjali's mother was transferred to one of the best cardiology clinics in the country. The operation was successful, and rehabilitation was going according to plan. The doctors were optimistic. Priya Sharma would fully recover. Anjali returned to college a different person, not because she had changed outwardly, but because she had understood something important about the nature of human relationships. People are capable of change. Enemies can become allies, and actions taken from a pure heart can have consequences we can't even imagine. On the first day back, she met Chelsea in the library. Thank you, Anjali said, approaching her table. Chelsea looked up from her book. For what? You know for what? Chelsea blushed. I just told my dad the truth about what you did for me. And what exactly did I do for you? Oh, Wes, you showed me who I really am and gave me a chance to be better. Chelsea paused. You know, I used to think that strength was the ability to make others do what you want. But you showed me that true strength is the ability to stop yourself when you have all the power in the world. Anjali sat down next to her. We both have changed, she said, and maybe that's for the better. Definitely for the better. Chelsea smiled. Want to help me with organic chemistry? I'm completely lost in isomers. Anjali laughed. Of course. The next months flew by like a blur. Anjali immersed herself in her studies, preparing for medical school. Every weekend, she visited her mother, who was getting better every day. Priya was amazed by the changes in her daughter's life, especially the emergence of unexpected friends and benefactors. How is this possible, Beta? She asked during one of the visits. The people who hurt you are now helping us? People change, Mom, Anjali replied. Sometimes you just have to give them that chance. And you? Have you changed too? Anjali pondered this question. Had she changed? In a way, yes. She no longer ran from her past. She had learned to forgive not only others but also herself. She learned to see not just the bad in people, but also the good. Yes, Mom, I've become stronger, but not in the way I used to think. I used to think strength was the ability to fight. Now I understand that strength is the ability not to fight when you have the chance. In the spring, the results of the medical school entrance exams came in. Anjali was accepted to Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and several other prestigious programs. The choice was obvious. Harvard, neurology, brain disease research. On graduation day, standing on the stage of the auditorium in her cap and gown, Anjali looked out at the audience. In the front row sat her mother, who was crying with pride. Next to her was Sarah, who also got into graduate school, but for sociology. A little further, she saw Chelsea with her parents. Richard Vanderbilt nodded at her and smiled. When the dean called her name to receive her honors diploma, the hall erupted in applause. Anjali walked to the stage and thought about the journey she had taken, about how 4 years ago she had come here as a scared girl with a dark secret, and now she was leaving as a confident woman with clear goals and a strong faith in the future. After the ceremony, Professor Johnson approached her. Miss Sharma, or should I say Dr. Sharma now, he said with a smile. I want to say that in all my years of teaching, I have rarely encountered students with as much potential as you. Thank you, Professor. You taught me a lot. Not just me. He glanced toward where Chelsea was standing. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. That evening, there was a graduation party. Anjali hadn't planned to stay long. Tomorrow she needed to go home to help her mother pack, as they were moving to Boston, where Anjali would be attending medical school. But just as she was about to leave, Chelsea approached her. "Can we talk?" she asked. They stepped out onto the terrace, where it was quiet and peaceful. In the distance, the lights of the city glowed, a city where they had spent 4 important years of their lives. "I wanted to tell you," Chelsea began, "that you have changed not only my life, but also the life of my family. My father says that I have become the daughter he always wanted to have." "You changed yourself," Anjali countered. "I just showed you a mirror." "A very painful mirror," Chelsea laughed, "but necessary." They stood in silence, looking at the stars. "What now?" Chelsea asked. "Waffer, you have Harvard, I have law school at Yale. Our paths are diverging again." "But now we are parting as friends," Anjali said. "And that's a completely different thing." "Friends," Chelsea repeated thoughtfully. "Who would have thought 4 years ago?" "Probably no one. But life is full of surprises." "Good surprises," and Chelsea added. "At least sometimes." They hugged goodbye, not as former enemies, not as casual acquaintances, but as people who had helped each other become better. The next morning, Anjali loaded her things into the car that Sarah had lent her. Everything fit into one suitcase and a few boxes of books. In 4 years of college, she hadn't accumulated many material possessions, but the baggage of another kind was immense. Experience, knowledge, friendship, understanding of who she wanted to become. The last thing she placed in the car was a photograph of her father, which had stood on her desk in the dormitory all these years. Ravi Sharma looked serious in the photo, but with warmth in his eyes. "I did it, Dad," Anjali whispered. "I became a doctor, just like you wanted. And I learned to use strength to heal, not to destroy." Driving down the highway towards New Jersey, where her mother was waiting, and then to Boston, where a new chapter of her life would begin, Anjali reflected on the past years, on the pain that nearly broke her, on the people who had wronged her and then became allies, on how important it is to be able to forgive, not for others but for oneself. New challenges awaited her in medical school. Sleepless nights, difficult exams, first patients, first losses. But she was ready to give everything she had to become the doctor the world deserves. And somewhere deep inside, in that place where the most important memories live, she held on to the lesson her own rage had taught her 4 years ago. A lesson that true strength is not in the ability to break someone, but in the ability to stop. Not in inflicting maximum pain, but in finding compassion even for those who do not deserve it. This lesson made her not only a better person, but also a future better doctor. Because medicine is the art of healing, and only those who have gone through pain and found the strength to overcome it can heal. Ahead lay a road that spanned a lifetime, a road of serving people, a road of constant learning and growth. And Anjali Sharma was ready to walk this road with her head held high, with a pure heart, and with unwavering faith that every person deserves a second chance, even those who were once her enemies, especially them. 8 years later, Dr. Anjali Sharma stood in her office in the neurology department of Massachusetts General Hospital. Her diplomas hung on the wall: a bachelor's degree with honors, a medical degree, a certificate of completion of a 4-year residency in neurology. But the most precious was a small photograph in a simple frame, her and her mother on the day of her medical school graduation. Priya Sharma had fully recovered from surgery and now worked as a nurse in the same hospital where her daughter served. At 53 years old, she was incredibly proud of Anjali. But what brought her the most joy was that her daughter had finally found peace with herself. On this day, Anjali was introduced to a special patient, a teenager who had been admitted to the hospital after a fight. Not an ordinary school brawl, but a serious conflict that resulted in several injuries. The boy had a head injury, and his parents insisted that he be examined by the best specialist. "Dr. Sharma?" A nurse entered the room. "Your patient is ready for examination." Anjali took the medical history and headed to the ward. What she saw made her stop at the threshold. On the hospital bed lay a slender, dark-haired boy of about 16. His hands were bandaged and his face bore bruises. But this did not surprise the doctor. What surprised her was the expression in his eyes. The same rage, the same inner fire that once lived in her own soul. Next to the bed sat a middle-aged woman, evidently the boy's mother. She was crying, and her tears spoke of despair. "Doctor," she addressed Anjali, "please help my son. I don't know what's happening to him. He has always been a good boy. But lately," Anjali approached the bed and looked closely at the teenager. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Daniel," the boy muttered, not raising his eyes. "Daniel, I'm Dr. Sharma. I need to examine you." "Swash and wash, do whatever you want," he replied indifferently. "Nothing will change anyway." Anjali began the standard neurological examination, but simultaneously observed the boy. In his movements, in the way he held his body, she recognized familiar signs. He was a fighter. Someone had taught him to fight, and to fight well. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" she asked during the examination. Daniel suddenly looked up. "How do you know?" "From the way you move, from how you hold your hands even in bandages." Anjali sat down on a chair next to the bed. "Who taught you?" "My grandfather," the boy replied reluctantly. "He was military. He said a man should be able to protect himself and his family." "And you protected yourself?" "Yes," Daniel flared up. "Those bastards were bullying my little sister. They said she was ugly, that our family was trash. I couldn't stand it." Anjali felt something tighten in her chest. The story was repeating itself. Another child, different circumstances, but the same pain, the same rage, the same sense of justice that could lead too far. "How many were there?" she asked. "5, but I handled them all." "And what did you feel during the fight?" Daniel was silent for a long time, then quietly said, "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. As if it wasn't me." Anjali closed her eyes. The same words she once said to Chelsea. The same state a fighter enters when survival instincts kick in. "Mom, can I talk to Daniel alone?" she asked. The woman looked uncertainly at her son, but left the room. "Daniel," Anjali said when they were alone, "I want to tell you a story about a girl who also knew how to fight, and who once went too far." For the next hour, she told the boy about Mumbai, about what happened 7 years ago, about the price her family paid, about how one moment of uncontrolled rage can change several lives forever. "But you were just defending yourself," Daniel said when she finished. "Just like me. Isn't that wrong?" "Defending yourself is right," Anjali replied. "But there is a fine line between defense and revenge. And when you cross that line, you risk becoming what you are fighting against." "So what was I supposed to do? Let them keep bullying my sister?" "No, but there are ways to solve problems without resorting to violence. Talk to teachers, to parents, to the police, after all." "Adults do nothing," Daniel flared up. "They say ignore them, don't pay attention. But how can you ignore it when your sister is brought to tears every day?" Anjali understood his pain. She had gone through it herself. "Daniel," she said seriously, "I'm not saying that fighting is always wrong. Sometimes it's the only way out. But you must understand the consequences, not only for yourself, but also for your family." "What are the consequences?" "Right now you're lucky. The victims don't want to sue because they know they are partly to blame for the conflict. But next time it could be different. Next time you could seriously injure someone, or even worse." Daniel paled. "I wouldn't want to hurt anyone." "Neither did I, but it happened." Anjali leaned forward. "Do you know what the scariest thing about martial arts is? It's not that you can cause pain to others. It's that in a moment of rage, you can lose control and go much further than you intended." The boy looked at her with wide eyes. "Daniel, you are stronger than most of your peers?" "Much stronger. And with great power comes great responsibility. You have to decide who you want to be, a protector or a warrior of vengeance." "And what's the difference?" "A protector uses strength only when there's no other option, and only as much as necessary. A warrior of vengeance uses strength to punish wrongdoers, and often goes too far." Anjali took a photograph out of her robe pocket, the one where she was with her father at a Kalarapayattu training session. "This is my father. He taught me how to fight, but the most important thing he taught me is when to stop." "Did you stop? Back then, in India?" "No. And my father died of a broken heart because he felt guilty for what happened." Anjali put the photograph away. "Don't repeat my mistakes, Daniel. You can be better than me." The boy was silent for a long time, processing what he had heard. "What should I do now?" he finally asked. First, recover, then go home and talk to your sister. Tell her you love her and will always protect her. But also explain that there are different ways to protect. And what if they start bothering her again? Then you will first try peaceful ways. Talk to their parents, to the school administration, and only if nothing helps. Anjali paused. Only then can you use force, but the minimum necessary force. How will I know what the minimum necessary is? You will learn. Every day for your whole life. I'm still learning. Daniel nodded. The blind rage that Anjali had seen in the first moments of their meeting was no longer in his eyes. Dr. Sharma, he said quietly, can I call you? If I don't know what to do? Anjali smiled and handed him her business card. Of course, anytime. When she left the room, Daniel's mother was waiting in the hallway. Doctor, how is he? What will happen to him? From a medical standpoint, he is completely healthy, Anjali said. Physically, he is fine. But with the emotional side, you need to talk to him a lot, and perhaps find him a psychologist who specializes in working with teenagers. And what about tendencies towards violence? Your son does not have tendencies towards violence, Anjali reassured her. He has tendencies towards justice. He just needs to be taught how to advocate for that justice properly. The woman nodded with relief. Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much. In the evening, Anjali sat in her office thinking about her meeting with Daniel. How strange life can be sometimes. She became a doctor to treat brain diseases, and instead today she treated a disease of the soul. The phone on her desk rang. Glancing at the caller ID, Anjali was surprised. It was Chelsea calling. Hi, she said, picking up the receiver. How's it going in New York? Hi, Anjali. Great, thanks. Listen, I'm calling about a case. A family came to my law firm. They have problems with their teenage son. He got into trouble because of a fight, and now they need a good lawyer. And the last name is Rodriguez. The mother's name is Maria. They say their son was seen by a wonderful doctor, Dr. Sharma. She said that if they need legal help, there's no better lawyer than Chelsea Vanderbilt. Anjali laughed. I didn't say better, I said honest. That's even better, Chelsea chuckled. Thanks for the recommendation. By the way, how is the boy? A serious case? Not more serious than we were once, Anjali replied thoughtfully. Just another child who needs to be shown that there are different ways to solve problems. I see. Well, I'll make sure he doesn't get prosecuted, and you make sure he doesn't repeat our mistakes. After the conversation, Anjali sat in her office for a long time, looking out the window at the lights of Boston. The circle had closed. She helped Daniel just as Chelsea had inadvertently helped her once. She showed him a mirror reflecting who he could become if he wasn't careful. Tomorrow, another day awaited her at the hospital. More patients, more stories of pain and healing. But today she felt a special satisfaction. Not just because she helped a boy who could repeat her mistakes, but because she realized everything she had gone through, all the pain and struggle, all the falls and rises, had led her exactly where she needed to be. Dr. Anjali Sharma was not just a doctor. She was a healer in the deepest sense of the word, a healer not only of bodies but of souls, and that perhaps was her true calling. On the table next to a photo of her mother lay another photograph, a Group 1 from college graduation. It featured her, Sarah, Chelsea, and several other classmates. They all took different paths, but they remained forever connected by those 4 years that changed them all. Anjali picked up the photograph and smiled. Yes, she had come a long way from that frightened girl who arrived in Westfield 7 years ago. A journey through pain, anger, forgiveness, and finally, self-acceptance. And now she was ready to help others walk the same path. Because sometimes the most important battles are not fought on the streets, but in our own hearts. And it's not the one who strikes the hardest who wins, but the one who knows when to stop. In this lay the wisdom she had gained at the cost of many tears and sleepless nights. And now she could pass this wisdom on to those who needed it. The circle had closed. The story continued.